Well, in the history of Mute, we've always had some kind of a studio facility. I mean, even when I started myself, I had my own little 4-track in my bedroom, classic kind of bedroom musician. And I've always felt it was very important to have a studio as part of the whole organization, and to have that studio not just part of it in terms of operationally, but also the location, to be either in the office or within a minute's walk of the office. Because I think, first of all, to have a creative space where artists can come, I think is really important in a good environment at a reasonable cost. And also because it brings the artist close to the label. We try to be very collaborative with our artists. Especially in the early days, all the deals we did were profit sharing deals, which meant that the artists had a lot more involvement in the process. We didn't want to create a them and us sort of situation like most major labels. We wanted I was a producer, whatever you want to call it, artist. I kind of felt that I wanted the artistic community around Mute to be very close. And one of the ways of doing that was to have a studio where people could come and work and be close to the people who worked in the label. So there wasn't a kind of them and us situation. For many years, for over 20 years, we had an office in the Harrow Road, and we had a really great studio facility there. Unfortunately, that building got knocked down and redeveloped. And then when we were part of EMI, we moved into the EMI building in Wrights Lane in Kensington. And even there, we kind of surreptitiously brought a mobile truck into the car park. Nobody really knew what it was. Everybody, it's funny when you do something like that, nobody wants to ask what it is, just in case they should know. But it was actually, we rented a mobile studio, which we used for about 2 years when we were at the EMI office, which had a small control room and small live area. It was great, actually. We did quite a lot of mixing in there as well, so that was good. And then when we moved here to our offices in Hammersmith a few years ago, it was very important to continue that theme of having our own studio. And fortunately, we were able to take over this space here, which is just across the road from us. And it's open to our artists. It's open to non-Mute artists. It's a commercially run studio. We provide sort of really good value, really good engineers, and some interesting electronic music equipment as well. One of the things that's really important about the studios that we've been associated with over the years, and this studio now, is to try and build a space where it's kind of collaborative, where it feels like a nice place to be, comfortable. We try and keep the equipment level as high as possible without pricing ourselves out of the market, or out of the market that we're in. I just think, and we thought a lot about how this studio was going to be laid out, about how the equipment was going to be laid out. We have quite a few vintage, veteran, heritage synths, whatever you want to call them, plus some obviously modern equipment as well. And for me, one of the most frustrating things is when you're in a studio with a few synths around, or a laptop or whatever, and things aren't properly plugged in, and somebody's crawling around on the floor trying to figure out how to plug something in. It really, so one of the important parts of making this studio work, especially from the electronic side, was to make a really good workflow, to make sure the workflow was smooth and creative and not too many interruptions. So everything's patchable, everything's patched in, whether it's MIDI, CV, clocks, DIN sync, whatever is required. It's all available instantaneously, all the synths coming up on the patch bay. Trying to keep the workflow, the creative flow as good as possible. I should just tell you that I'm not a studio engineer. I'm fortunate enough to work with some really good engineers, but I don't know all the technical details about the desk and about some of the outboard. But we spent a lot of time thinking about what kind of desk we were going to have in the mid 2014s. We used to have some great AMAC desks back in the Harrow Road back in the day, which we loved, but felt that they weren't really kind of suited to the way we wanted to work going forward in terms of space, and just in terms, we didn't need that kind of facility anymore. And there were some interesting other possibilities, to integrate with the software and so forth. And we arrived at the decision was to get the solid state logic matrix desk, which really happy with. It's very good to work with, very flexible, I don't personally operate it that much, but I enjoy working with it. We use Pro Tools as our main DAW, although personally I use Ableton Live, which I love, along with the Ableton Push, which is a great piece of hardware. And so, I mean, here we have Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, but people tend to end up mixing from Pro Tools. Yeah, some interesting stuff down here. There's a Moog phaser, which is super spacey and really rich, resonant sounding, great phaser. I really love, my favorite though is this MXR pitch transposer, which has you can set 4 presets up on the buttons, and then you can just press them and go through the different presets to get weird. It's got a very weird sound. It's not, there's nothing authentic about it whatsoever, so that's good. It's got, lots of feedback, and you just get, really nice. I think I've had that since like 1979. Bought second hand off this guy who was selling stuff off. I mean, that was the thing in those days. People, there was a really good second-hand market. There probably is now as well, but there's a really good second-hand market for people like me who couldn't anywhere near afford any of this stuff new. So it was great. Yeah, this is a piano. Don't know if you've seen one of these before. Really quite a nice looking thing. Very musical. This actually was used to be in the offices of our publishing company, which is just across the road, but we thought we'd put it to better use in the studio. But when it was in our offices, we published artists like Nick Cave and Polly Scattergood, and they all used to play on it when they came to visit us in the publishing company. It's great. I think Nick even wrote some songs on here, so it's got a nice history to it. Sounds pretty good too. Sounds very good, in fact. Some of these synths have got a bit of a history to them. Well, we've got classic 909 drum machine, Roland, classic 808, and the 303 bass line, acid house, all of which have been in our studios for many, many, many years. All work really well, all sound amazing. This is a mini Moog, some of you will recognize. Actually used to belong to Gary Newman. Still got the original flight case somewhere, so that's really nice. This is a Pro 1 Prophet monophonic synth, amazing sound. This used to belong to the keyboard player with Fad Gadget. Turn it down. There you go. That sounds great. This is a Russian. It's a Polyvox Russian Soviet era synth. There's a band on mute called Night Sareb, great band, and they played quite a lot in the old Soviet Union back in the day. And they came back from one of their tours there, and they said, and one of the guys said, "Look, do you want to?" There's a guy in Russia who we met in Siberia actually, who would swap a Polyvox for a DX7. So I said, no problem at all. So the next time they went on tour, they took the DX7 out with them and brought this back, which is actually a far more interesting synthesizer than the DX7, in my opinion. Got a filter that distorts in a really interesting way. So that's the Polyvox. This is more recent. This is a drum module, a Russian drum module. I'd rather you didn't ask me what it was called because I'm afraid I can't read the language. But it's basically a triggerable drum module. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drums. Sounds incredible. Doesn't sound like anything else at all. Quite often trigger it from here, from the trigger outputs from the 808 or 909. So you can program it from here, but you get the Russian sounds. This is an ARP sequencer, which is, we're fortunate enough to have a couple of these. I've got a couple at my studio at home. This was kind of at the heart of a lot of the work we did in the sort of early 80s, well, still is actually, but especially then when we had this and an old ARP 2600, which I still have, but it's not here, which was originally owned by Elton John. So there's a lot of, but we used this to pretty much make, especially on like the early Depeche records, Fad Gadget records, Silicon Teens records. This was used to pretty much do all the rhythmic work, all the bass lines, a lot of this sort of percussive effects. We used to sync it to tape. We figured out how to sync it to tape so we could do sequenced overdubs. That And this is like one of my favorite tools in all the synth world that exists, because it's only 16 steps and it's just really perfect, minimal kind of tool. Create such incredible sounds using not just to control pitch, but filters. You've got the rhythmic controls here. Love it. Anyway, love it. This is a Roland System 100M modular. Very nice sounding. You know, all the usual things, oscillators, filters, VCAs, and other sequencers are here. Very nice sequencer, envelope generators, phasers, equalizers. We use that very much in conjunction with this, but also with other things as well. One of my favorites, the EMS vocoder 2000. Sounds, there are a lot of digital vocoders out there, just don't cut it when it comes to vocoders. You've got, you know, it's the analog sound on here. It's just very robotic indeed. It's not so much, it's more craftwork than ELO, I would say. This is a kind of Moogie-ish SE1 synth. I love this little, it's quite a modern little modular synth called a tiny sizer. It's like a portable modular synth. It really appeals to my sense of portability. It's got tiny little cables, but it's, once you get your head around it, it's really flexible. You get some great sounds. It's also got MIDI in, very flexible. You can very easy to hook up with other modular synths through these inputs here. That's really great. What else can I tell you? Yeah, I mean, Waldorf Wave down here, wavetable synth, behind Matrix 1000. And Arturia. I mean, if you can't make a great sound with this lot, you know, you shouldn't. You should have to work. You should have to try harder, I would say.